Welcome to the Solid Verbal.
The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo-woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrand. Over there on the other side of the table is a fine gentleman we like to call Mr. Dan Rubenstein. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm under the weather. I am currently full of Cuban food because that's what you do in Tampa. But you know what, Ty? It's wonderful to see you. Life is great. We're here for Alabama Clemson. And we mentioned this on twitter.com/solidverbal. Got some goofs going on in the background. We have a multi-layered college football playoff national championship preview. And so we have decided in advance to just get as much information as possible so that once we get here, we can just be dumb and not rely on people.
Generally, as we discussed, we're very unreliable.
Yes, we are very much
when it comes to planning things out in advance. So the fact that we did as much as we did beforehand, I think really is a testament to how much we've grown as individuals. That's what this is all about.
I can't believe we have almost assuredly pulled this off. So we have a show that you will hear momentarily. So we have this game, Alabama Clemson. We have recruiting with Bud Elliott, SB Nation recruiting analyst, editor, and just sort of how these two teams constructed themselves. We have a statistical profile with Bill Connolly. We have Ryan Nanny to just be, his usual stuff.
Tell us about Tampa.
About Tampa.
What are we to do when we're down here?
He did make some recommendations. Hey, there's Chip Patterson from CBS. And we have, who am I forgetting right now? We have Andy Staples to talk about Nick Saban.
Crispy Brown.
We have Crispy Brown. Woo-hoo, I'm being tickled by Chip Patterson right now. We have Crispy Brown. We spoke with him about exactly what Clemson does on offense and how they simplify and how they go about their business. We have Richard Johnson from SB Nation, who also is sitting at this table, just minding his own business. He has a lot of pertinent information on Alabama's rushing attack and how that has evolved over the last couple years, now with Jalen Hurts, and all sorts of goodness. Am I missing anybody? We have Ryan Abraham to talk about the Sark factor.
The Sark factor? It is Sark week here, which we'll get into in a little bit. So, as we mentioned, they call this Audio Avenue.
Yes.
This is now the sixth time I counted.
Is that
you and I have been at a national championship.
Since Arizona.
It's grown in terms of the production that we put into this whole national championship week thing. They call this Audio Avenue. They've been kind enough to invite us to this portion of the media gathering for the last couple of years now. This year it's decidedly louder because the room is decidedly narrower.
Yes.
So I think we're really going to have to project here.
That's fine.
If we want to get our voices out there, these people will know us by the time we leave.
So we have around this room, it looks like, is that Bobby Bowden over there?
That could be Bobby Bowden. Yeah.
I can't tell. All old people.
I see the Tennessee end zone with the checkerboards over there. I don't see.
We've got Tony Bruno behind me. We've got Sirius XM. It's a hearty group. We ran into rivals in the elevator coming down here, Bruce and Stu from Fox Sports. We had a knife fight.
Yep.
And they seem to be doing all right. So, Ty, let's start with this. Big picture, since we are going sort of micro with the layers that we're about to dip into. Big picture, what do you think Alabama Clemson is sort of defined by?
I think it's defined by Alabama's defense and by Alabama's dominance over this stretch that Nick Saban's been there.
Yeah.
I think far and away, when you think of these two teams, that's what comes to mind. What I'm interested in, and I wanted to ask you and really all the people that we talk with, as you know, when you do research for a game like this, it's very much incremental.
Yep.
It builds on things that we knew back in week one that we've come to redefine now after 15 weeks of college football. Yep. When you did your research and started looking into, all right, what are the key factors for me, Dan? What's going to work for Clemson? What's going to work for Alabama? What was your starting point for that research? Were you coming from a place where you're just automatically assuming that Alabama is dominant, Alabama's unbeaten, it's going to be near impossible to beat Alabama, or were you coming at it from a perspective of this is a close game last year, Deshaun Watson's a transcendent player, could have very easily won the Heisman this year. What was the starting point for you?
The starting point was, one, just figuring out how much I can believe in Clemson after a year in which it's been tricky to believe in Clemson. Even though they've sort of almost run the table, they have the loss against Pitt. I wanted to see if it was So if it was a matter of anomalies with, Deshaun Watson struggling in the passing game, the Troy game was very close. The NC State game should have probably been a loss, the loss to Pitt. But then when we know what we can get when Clemson is firing on all cylinders. So I wanted to know if it was just a matter of Clemson playing sloppy, and when they're focused, they're great. Because I think Alabama's, especially defensively, it almost doesn't matter what Alabama does on offense when they're not letting teams score more than like 13 points. So Clemson, to me, even though we've seen them in this spot, was still much more of an unknown quantity after this season. So it was figuring out the differences between good and bad Clemson. That's what it's actually defined by, because they were so close last year.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the defense. Our favorite meaningless stat is total defense. Alabama led the nation in that.
Yep.
For whatever it's worth. They also led the nation in scoring defense, 11.4 points per game.
Yep.
In rushing defense, they allowed only 62 per game, 2 yards per carry, which is crazy, and 14th in passing defense. So across the board, a really well-balanced defense.
Do you want to see what the Danalytics look like?
What the Danalytics? Do you have it in front of you?
This
Gosh.
monstrosity?
Wow.
Look at this.
Did the solid fiance say yes before or after she saw that?
She's the one who told me how to use VLOOKUP.
Whoa,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's real.
It's real with VLOOKUP. Okay.
So, the Danalytics obviously love both of these teams. There's some weaknesses for Clemson. The only thing that you can say about Alabama is their touchdown frequency isn't top of the top. It's right around 40, which is fine when you have the defense that they have. And they've stalled some in the red zone. But as we saw against Washington, they can generate longer touchdowns, and so it doesn't matter as much.
Here's what spooks me a little bit. All year, it was Alabama is dominant.
Right.
Dominant.
But in what context?
Dominant in that you can't run on them, you can't score on them.
Right.
You're not going to beat them, period. Now they've got this third dimension, if you will, with a running quarterback. Mm-hmm. It's tough to try and defend all of that ammo. What spooks me now is if you read media reports in the build-up to this game, a lot of people that I think very highly of in sports media and college football media have slowly gravitated towards Clemson.
Correct.
And I don't know why that is. I didn't see anything last week other than a truly dominant performance against Ohio State. It was great.
Shutout, Ty. A
Shutout, okay, it was great. I didn't see anything in that game that otherwise would lead me to believe, that Clemson would all of a sudden win this game. I felt pretty good about what I saw on the Alabama side. But all week I've been reading about people, I think it was USA Today, 5 of 7 vote for Clemson. So I'm starting to overthink this. It's my most redeeming quality.
So we know about this matchup already because we've seen it. We saw it last year. There isn't too much that's different. I mean, the Alabama quarterback situation is certainly big. The addition of Mike Williams for Clemson is certainly large. The loss of a couple of key defenders for Clemson is certainly a big factor. But unlike the Notre Dame matchup, in which we saw a lot of late intellectual money coming in on Notre Dame, right? We sort of talked to ourselves into that defense has been great all year.
I'm like, Pete Sampson's thinking this line can get a push. Yeah.
Loves it. The thing is with Clemson, they just shut out a playoff team. Not a pretty good team. They shut out a playoff team. Not 1, not 2, not even 3, but 4 fingers deep, Ty.
4
fingers deep.
Right.
So we know that Clemson, with authority, has the capability to beat Alabama, right?
I would think so.
Whereas with Notre Dame, in this situation a few years ago, when people started talking themselves into it, it was sort of like, well, maybe, if, and then. I think it's a totally different scenario with this pick.
Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
When I saw the point spread for the Alabama-Washington game, I thought to myself, Alabama can definitely cover this.
Yeah.
And they did. When I look at this point spread, depending where you look, 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5 in some places, I look at that and I say, I don't feel great about that.
I think it was OddsShark. I think the money is about 59-41 Clemson right now.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about it. Now, of course, it's a separate ball of wax altogether. Can they beat them?
Yeah.
Can they outright beat them? Last year, scored a late touchdown, covered the point spread. This year, I don't know. So that's sort of the whole purpose of this. The game is Monday night, 8 p.m., down here in Tampa at Raymond James Stadium.
Yep.
I don't know if they have the pirate ship decorated in any particular fashion, or if they'll fire the cannons if any team scores.
I would pay attention to Richard Johnson. He will be doing a stadium walkthrough. So he will be getting the information that you such desire, Ty.
Full disclosure, he's seated right
He's
next
still
to it.
sitting right
He's
here.
still seated here,
But
yeah.
since he's already on this show, we're not paying him enough money.
That's right.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what this comes down to.
Yeah.
Monday night, 8 p.m., Raymond James Stadium. Look for Richard's walkthrough. The game is on ESPN. Of course, Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, Tom Rinaldi's going to be doing Alabama. I saw Sam Ponder is going to have the Clemson sidelines. Alabama's 14-0. They are a 6.5-point favorite, at least on my sheet, over Clemson.
Yep.
13-1, the one loss coming against Pitt earlier in this season. What our plan is for this show is to walk through those layers. We're going to analyze this from an analytical standpoint as far as schemes go, as far as matchups go. We're going to talk about the Sark factor and all sorts of things here over the course of the next hour or so.
Yeah.
Before we get there, though, we got to pay some bills. Here is an appropriately pre-recorded commercial. We're working ahead. This is what we do now.
I love this.
Let's do the commercial, then we'll come back.
Today's National Championship preview is brought to you by our good friends over at Casper. Casper is an obsessively engineered mattress at a shockingly fair price. Supportive memory foams hug your each and every curve to create an award-winning sleep surface with just the right amount of sink and just the right amount of bounce. So much so that Time Magazine named it one of the best inventions of 2015. In fact, it is now the most awarded mattress of the entire decade. Now you can try Casper 100 nights risk-free in your own home. If you don't love it, let them know they'll pick it up and refund you everything. Casper understands the importance of truly sleeping on a mattress before you commit, especially considering you're going to spend 1/3 of your life on it. Free shipping and returns to the United States and Canada. Here is the deal. Get $50 towards any mattress purchase right now by visiting Casper, casper.com/verbal and using the offer code verbal. That's casper.com/verbal, offer code verbal, $50 toward any mattress purchase. Terms and conditions do apply.
All right, Dan, let's get rolling with our layered.
It's a great read, by the way, Ty. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Where are we starting?
Let's get rolling with our layered preview.
Yes.
So, a good way to start this thing is to take a step back. Let's look at the numbers, just the way we always do before every game during
the
college
most
football's
important
regular
part
season.
of the sport, the numbers.
The numbers,
Yeah.
how the game is played on paper, and whatnot. You talked to Bill Connolly.
I did. And what was really interesting to me is I did. And you know what? Let's just start out right here. I asked him if anything jumped out to him, even surprised him about the stat profiles of Clemson and Alabama. It's pretty interesting.
Okay, here's some of your interview.
Well, I don't think there are any major surprises here from a stat standpoint. I mean, basically the biggest advantages Alabama seems to have, and you can see how this would define the game. Clemson's not a very good running team. They're better than they were at the beginning of the year, but Alabama's Alabama. They're not going to allow big run plays. They're going to Clemson's a pretty bad short yardage team, so Alabama's going to pretty much put it all on Deshaun Watson's shoulders. And that might work out okay for Clemson, but that's kind of what's going to happen here. It would be very surprising if Clemson was able to generate too much on the ground. And then on the other side, what we saw Clemson being able to do to JT Barrett last week, I think is pretty similar too. You're going to see, a very good pass rush, making Jalen Hurts' life pretty uncomfortable when they have to pass or when he chooses to pass. Alabama will be better at running the ball than Ohio State was, or at the very least, it's safe to assume they won't give up on the run as quickly as Ohio State did. And so, maybe that's enough. Maybe they get enough run production that it doesn't matter that they can't really pass. But I don't think Alabama will be able to pass very well.
What is a glaring deficiency or tendency for each team that you think will be very much publicly on display in this game?
Well, I think Clemson's lack of a run game really is, like I said, they have improved as the season has progressed, but I don't think they're ready to take on Alabama in that regard yet. And I think that they give up a bunch of negative run plays. They get stuffed in short yardage situations a lot. If you do those things against Alabama, I mean, any other quarterback and being rendered one-dimensional pretty much ends your chances. But I do think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a situation where this iffy run game is just completely non-existent against Alabama. I'd be surprised if Gallman really gets going in that regard. For Alabama, though, I mean, it's kind of the same deal. They also give up some negative run plays. They give up a ton of sacks. And as we saw, they didn't move down too much in the ratings for not being able to pass against Washington because Washington has a very good pass defense. But they won't be able to rely on the pass. That's for sure. Clemson's pass defense is fantastic, and if it becomes a situation where Hurts has to have time, I mean, not only they have to pass, but I mean he has to get receivers downfield. It's going to be really tough because Clemson rushes the passer really, really well.
Is there anything else from the statistical profile of these two teams, the profiles of these two teams, that stands out to you as perhaps being unexpected?
Well, I think maybe because we remember last year's 45-40 game. It's most of the advantages on both sides of the ball are defensive. That's usually the case with Alabama, just because they typically have humongous defensive advantages against anybody. But even against Clemson, it's the case. And then on the other side, even against Alabama, Clemson's defensive advantages, the pass rush and whatnot, seem to stand out. So I would be really, really surprised if we get anywhere close to 85 points in this game. It feels more like a 25-20 situation than 45-40.
All right, so that's Bill's perspective. That's how he sees the game shaking out. Doesn't see as many points, could see it unfolding in a similar fashion.
Two great defenses. I don't think it's a reach at all to say that.
In a similar, close fashion as we did last year. The next place you and I decided to look for clues was through our good friend Bud Elliott.
Yep.
So as you know, Bud Elliott does a great job, Tomahawk Nation, covering the Noles to the degree that they do. But he's also really in the weeds when it comes to all things recruiting.
Yep.
And when you look at games like this and you look at matchups, you want to talk to people who not only know the teams well, but also know the players, know the construction of the team, the talent on the team, really know what these coaches are working with. So we asked Bud, can you give us some indication where you think this thing might head based on the construction of these two teams?
These are the two best houses in college football. They have the two best foundations. Absolutely.
For about the billionth year in a row now, it seems, the national championship is going to go to a team that has signed more 4 and 5 stars over the last 4 seasons than 2 and 3 stars. Got to have a certain minimum level of talent to take home the national title. I call that the blue chip ratio, and you can read about that on SBNation.com. This year, Alabama, unsurprisingly, was number 1 in the blue chip ratio, with an incredible 77% of their signees over the last 4 years being blue chips. Clemson was number 12 with 52%. Really, the goal here is just to be over half. What we see with Clemson, though, is that Clemson has one of the most talented rosters in college football, much like Alabama does. Other than the quarterback position, though, these teams are not that dissimilar. They both have dominating defensive lines. Clemson with Christian Wilkins, Carlos Watkins, and importantly, Dexter Lawrence, who I think is probably, if you want to make an NFL comparison, talent-wise, probably the closest thing we've seen to Albert Haynesworth since Albert Haynesworth. He moves like a 300-pound guy despite being 40 pounds bigger, and that's a whole lot of mass moving at a quick speed. It's just difficult to block. On the other side, I think if you look at Alabama, one of their most impressive players this year is Jonah Williams, a former 5-star offensive tackle. I believe he enrolled early, came in, started immediately, has played great this entire year. And playing offensive tackle is a really tough ask of a true freshman. But the Tide, they have Jonah Williams on one side who's doing it, and on the other side, they have Cam Robinson, who's one of the top draft prospects, and he's been doing it for 3 years now. Alabama, we know all the stars up front, and that's really, I think, what separates Alabama from most of the other teams is when you have this much talent on the team, there's no doubt that you're able to practice at a higher level, because if you take a day off practice at Alabama, they have somebody else probably very close to your talent level behind you, and I think the drop-off in terms of talent when you go down the depth chart at Alabama is less than it is at other schools. At other schools, they may have the top-level talent may be the same, but they probably haven't stockpiled quite that depth, as we've seen. Again, 77% of their signees over the last 4 years being 4 and 5 stars. That's by far the biggest amount in the country. I'm excited to watch this ball game because I think there are really playmakers at every position. Alabama has a nice trio of running backs like Wayne Gallman out of Clemson, but really it's can either side block each other? They're so good on the defensive lines that I think it's hard to do a lot offensively against these guys. Pitt tore up Clemson a little bit. Alabama really hasn't given up many points the entire year, but they're missing a couple guys on defense. Missing Eddie Jackson, now one of their top linebackers is out as well. One of their better cover guys at the linebacker position. I'm excited to watch this game. You don't see a whole lot of matchups that feature this much talent on the field at one time. And from somebody who makes his money on people caring about recruiting, I'm really happy to see that, again, the national championship rings are going to go to a team that has recruited what I've defined as kind of the minimum threshold of talent you need to bring home the title.
Okay, thank you, Bud. Next up, where do we look for our clues next?
Crispy Brown, of course.
Chris B.
Crispy Brown of Smart Football and has done some work for The Ringer, formerly of Grantland. Touched on a number of issues, but really focused in on Clemson, their offense, and how well the wrinkles that they've added these past couple of seasons, how well they're working.
Chris Brown, smartfootball.com, has been a long-time guest of the show, has a lot to offer.
I mean, as we know, Clemson went into the year not wanting to run Deshaun Watson too much, which is, I think, a smart move, but is also a little bit of a challenge at times when you're a spread offense that's sort of designed and originally built to include quarterback runs in what you do. Otherwise, you'd run a pro-style offense and do something else. So at times it felt like this year they were playing with one hand behind their back, but against Ohio State, you saw them unveil a couple things they hadn't shown previously, and then also just emphasize a couple more that they've been working on this year. One of the main ones, and ironically, you actually saw Alabama run the same play, was something growing out of a play that Cam Newton made famous a few years ago, which is called the inverted veer or the power read, which is basically where the offensive line will block sort of an old school traditional power play. The backside guard will pull around, but instead of sending your fullback to kick out or block that defensive end like you see Stanford and Michigan running with Jim Harbaugh, the quarterback will read that defender, and he'll either hand it off to a running back on a sweep around end, or if you remember Cam Newton winning the Heisman Trophy, sort of keeping it himself and running right up the middle for a big run. That play has been effective for the last 5-6 years in college football. You've seen a lot of teams try to find new ways and new wrinkles to take that same idea and expand on it or do different things. One of the cool ones is something that I heard sort of high school coaches talk about really a short time ago, about a year ago, and then suddenly a bunch of teams started running it this year, including Clemson and, again, later in the year, Alabama, which is where instead of putting the ball in the running back's belly as he sort of fakes a sweep and then letting him try to dash around end, the running back will actually swing out, and the quarterback has the option to either pitch it to him or keep it up the middle himself, which allows the running back to get wide much more quickly. What it does is it kind of takes the old speed option, like the Nebraska, old school option football, where the quarterback runs down the line and can either pitch it or keep it himself, and combines it with the inverted veer power read game, where it's a little bit of it's both a faster read, gets it to the running back faster, or a little bit slower, more deliberate run inside. And so you've seen Clemson use it a bunch of times well this year. They pitched outside to Wayne Gallman a couple times. When Alabama ran it, you saw Jalen Hurts keep it up inside for like a first down. But the other wrinkle is that Ohio State was ready for that play. They were ready. They'd clearly scouted it. So where they really killed Ohio State and Deshaun Watson at a touchdown and 2 or 3 really huge runs was where he faked like he was tossing it, but then instead of running the power read to the same side, he came back the other way and ran what they call a counter play or counter tray, where the guard and then the tight end would pull around and lead around, which ironically to Ohio State is probably one of their best plays, is the counter tray. And when you saw Ohio State try to defend the thing, they ended up a guy short a couple different times. Watson took it down the sideline for a bunch of big gains, and so it was a great example using the bowl season to both expand what they were doing, using more runs with Deshaun Watson when it's crunch time, but then also taking Ohio State's preparation and using it against them, which is something you have to do against Alabama, because they've watched 10 years of your film and scouted you out and know every tendency, so you have to strategically break your tendencies.
So who does it specifically stress, this variation on a single concept? Who on the defense is it meant to make a quick decision? And you say Ohio State was ready, so now with even more variations to this play, how do you anticipate teams, and I guess specifically Alabama in this case, or Clemson in this case, defensively, since they both run it on offense, what is a potential solution to cover every single area if possible?
Well, that's the whole game, is you can't cover every single area. So the base play itself, whether it's the inverted veer or the toss, toss read concept is you're just trying to read the defensive end. So if he goes out with a running back, the quarterback keeps it inside. If he crashes down inside, you pitch it outside. You defend that by getting your other players involved, safeties coming downhill, linebackers scraping over the top to stop the running back. And then that's when you start opening up other things. So Ohio State plays a quarters cover 4 defense, so which basically requires the safeties to be hard run defenders, and then they also give a lot of flexibility because the safeties are there on sort of either side of the line to the linebackers to flow fast and defend the play. So that was why Clemson then faked the toss read and then ran the counter the other way, and you had the linebackers either hesitated or over pursued towards where the running back went, and then so when Watson sort of took it around end, you actually saw on a couple of them the pulling tight end basically almost had no one to block until he was 5, 6, 7, 8 yards downfield. He ended up hooking the safety and resulting in a big gain. So that was where Clemson saw the reaction from Ohio State and then stressed the linebackers. A fun example from earlier in the year is Ole Miss runs this play a little bit, and when they played Alabama early on, Alabama had its safeties coming downhill hard because they were Saban's known for playing sort of cover 1 with a single safety deep or cover 3, but actually against a lot of spread teams, he'll play a lot more sort of 2 safety looks where the safeties can get involved in the run game. And they ran a play where they faked the toss read. The running back ran out wide. The guard pulled, but it was a play action pass, and they hit a 63-yard touchdown wide open. Because the safety and sort of the nickel guy both just came up to try to stop the sweep and the quarterback. So that's the fun part about it, is that it's a cat and mouse game, sort of on the macro sense, but even in the micro, you figure out who's overreacting, what are they doing to take away the play, and then you come back with something else to try to take advantage. I do expect to see Clemson take a couple shots, maybe faking the toss read or even the toss sort of read counter that they were running, and then maybe trying to take a shot to Mike Williams or somebody downfield.
Do you anticipate Alabama being able to adjust quickly? I mean, we're still talking about 7 to 9 days to be able to adjust to all of the different options that Clemson will have, or is it simply a cat and mouse thing and hope that your talent is good enough to play on an island?
I mean, yes and no. Will Alabama adjust and Alabama be prepared? Yes, that team does nothing but adjust and prepare, and even within series, between plays, once you do something that works, the old adage with Alabama, and I've heard everybody from Gus Malzahn to other people say, if it worked in one series, don't expect it to ever work again because that team adjusts like no other. On the other hand, there's a limited number of numbers, and this is where Clemson now being in the playoffs, where they're sort of using the full talents of Watson. Understandably, they don't want to take him to take a bunch of hits, but using his full talents to try to stress the defense. So then it does result in, okay, if Alabama's going to bring a safety up, maybe they don't fake them out like Ole Miss did, but you still have a one-on-one with Mike Williams or somebody, and it's just a regular play action pass or some other traditional run, or they're able to option a guy or do something. But then the other element too is that the play only works if you can block the counter or block the power. And as you've seen, even with Washington, who I thought had a perfectly rational plan against Alabama, they might make the right read, but if you can't block Jonathan Allen on the double team and he splits your double team and then is ready to tackle the quarterback 2 yards deep in the backfield, you had the right scheme, but just didn't get those guys blocked. And that's a lot of what Alabama's just done to people this year, is that sort of scheme destroyers. You have a great plan, but can't block that front seven.
Something you've also written about recently is you've looked over an older Clemson playbook from a couple years ago and sort of noticed certain themes throughout, and it seemed like the main thing that jumped out to you was simplicity, which has gone a long way, obviously, for Clemson. I think there's something like 59-9 since they lost the Orange Bowl. How do you think a sort of theme and notion of simplicity plays to Clemson's possible strength against a near impossible defense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strength until it isn't. So it's a strength in that it gets everyone on the same page. They're able to play with a lot of tempo, is what a lot of that's built around, is that they have a good number of formations, but they don't throw a ton of concepts at you, and then they do include things. They include a variety of concepts or ideas or different schemes without having to have a million ways to do each one. So they have quick passes, downfield passes, play action passes, sort of shot sort of deep plays. They have base runs, option runs, read runs, screens. They have all those different things, but they don't have a huge playbook like there's some kind of West Coast offense where they have 100 versions of each. And so it allows them to play fast, play efficient, and they're very good. And I give a credit to Davo and his staff. Is they really think players, not plays. They're not trying to necessarily fool you, though they're doing sound stuff and trying to get advantages. But it's recruit really good players and get them the ball in their hands and put them in good positions. But eventually, there can be limits to too much simplicity if the other team knows what's coming and they can stop it. I mean, and that's sort of the ultimate challenge on that is playing an experienced, well-coached Alabama defense, who their preparation is unreal. You can't tell me that they didn't spend some of the bowl preparation time on Clemson, a team they also prepared for last year, so they're very familiar with them. And so a question then becomes if Alabama can get ahead of you, do you have answers? And that's where the challenge is if you're too simple, is that if they take away sort of option A and B and you just don't even have a C. So that's where that cat and mouse game goes. It's also just a matter of the other thing I thought was interesting in the playbook was the passing game was really, really, really simple. I mean, it was like almost so simple. It was kind of a high school passing game at times. Now, they've grown it a lot. That was from 2013. Deshaun Watson, they've really tried to expand it to sort of benefit his talents, but they're not running the West Coast offense over there. A lot of it is based on you got to defend the run, you got to defend the formations, you got to defend the tempo, you got to defend the read option stuff, and then they'll even do the run pass options things where if you crash down, they'll throw a hitch or a little a quick screen or something like that, and then they'll even do some motions and bootlegs and stuff to get the pass game involved, and only at that point is it okay and go drop back and read 1, 2, 3, 4 in a pass progression. But I think it's really hard to do that against Alabama because they rush you so fast, but it's also a team that is going to force you to do what you don't feature. And last year in the championship game, Watson threw the ball really well, and the biggest thing was the receivers went up and made a bunch of contested catches and big plays. And so I think that will be the stress on Clemson's playbook, on Watson himself, and then on the whole Clemson team is can they execute in the pass game against a defense that they're running an NFL sophisticated defense over there. It's like the Bible, their playbook. And so, I would say comparing Clemson's offensive playbook to Alabama's defensive playbook, there are more pages dedicated to pass concepts and offensive formations and schemes in Alabama's defensive playbook than there were in Clemson's offensive playbook. It is a Bible of defense. So that'll be a real challenge. And the group that I think we'll know pretty early in the game how the flow of the game's going to go, because last year Clemson's offensive line played, I thought, really, really well. Obviously, Watson played great and Gallman and those guys, but the offensive line blocked those guys, and I think that's we'll see in the first few series, can they block Alabama? Because as I said, you can have all the great scheme in the world, but a lot of that, Alabama's made a habit of throwing that out the window by just being in your backfield the whole game.
Final question. It's something you've talked about extensively, not just with Nick Saban, but also with some other really noted defensive minds like Gary Patterson. Alabama plays a couple of different coverages against, we're talking about a very good quarterback in Deshaun Watson, but against everybody. And the thing that you've sort of come back to and explained, and if you could just give a Cliff's Notes, especially since Clemson will run a lot of tempo and a lot of run pass option at times. What exactly is pattern matching, and how can it help to deaden run-pass option and some sort of more stressful spread option attacks?
Sure. A couple elements of pattern match, and really at this point it's become sort of a principle, and I think it's actually increasingly difficult to find teams that don't use some sort of pattern match concept as opposed to traditional zone. And so all pattern matching is really it's somewhere between a matchup zone in basketball, or another way to think about it is it's just man-to-man, but instead of just old school backyard saying, I got him, and you just play man across the field. It's a man-to-man, but there's some rules and principles. So meaning that I have man-to-man on him if he runs 10 yards downfield, and then I just play man on him everywhere. Or I have man-to-man on him if he runs a short route, but then if he doesn't, I'm going to then become a floating robber player, or I'll go double team someone else. And so it's just rules. I increasingly just think about it as rules for man-to-man defense, which is one reason why I think Alabama is so good at coaching, is because they play a lot of just true man, and then they also mix in pattern match concepts. And so the other element is that one reason they're so good at pass defense is that because they're pattern match, it's the rules for man-to-man, but then they specifically, and as I said, their playbook has like 100 and something pages on like passing concepts, is that Saban teaches them not just, the old school zone is drop to your zone and read the quarterback's eyes and break on the ball. And this goes back to Saban's time with Bill Belichick. I mean, he used to say, you're playing Dan Marino, they'll break on the ball, shit don't work. So that's where a lot of this grew out of. So they have names for them. So they name, it's like, one concept is pull, another is sluggo, another is seam, another is whatever the concept is. So they actually teach the defense, here's the actual passing concept they're running. And so when you read their playbook, it looks like an NFL playbook for an offense, because they have every pass concept you could see. So what that does is a few things. One, a big tenet of Saban's defenses is he doesn't like to give you easy throws. He talks a lot about when you watch one-on-one drills for defenses, if they're playing off coverage, it's like 80%, 85% completions for the offense. But all of a sudden you get up there and press them and challenge receivers, the completion percentage drops to like 30, 25%. Now, most coaches are afraid to do that because they're afraid of getting beat deep. But Saban's got great athletes, and he personally coaches the secondary. They also have a great pass rush. They have a lot of time. And then the big thing is his theory is that if you just can get offenses off schedule. So the other thing was where it helps defend on things like run-pass options is just the fact that they're actually covering all the receivers. They're defending them all. The whole point of a run-pass option is you're either running the ball or you're taking some sort of gimme easy throw, like a quick screen to the outside or like a 5-yard stop route by a receiver. And they're just covering those receivers, taking them away. I will say pattern match, you could argue, is at times more vulnerable to run-pass options. And if you watch, like a team like the Baylor teams or some of those that sort of were very aggressive run-pass option teams, a lot of that was designed around taking advantage of pattern match teams, because those teams will often have players who are in sort of have both run and pass responsibility. So there's still elements of that. But I think the biggest thing that Alabama does that makes it hard to run and be really good at run-pass options against them is that they just run so many defenses. You don't know where they're going to be. It's like it's sort of like old school option football. If you run the triple option, you're trying to read the defensive end or the defensive tackle or the linebacker. If they're moving defenses and blitzing guys and moving stunts and playing, you talk about coverages. A lot of them are variations on the same coverages, but they have 70 coverages, 50 coverages, all these different Seahawks, solo, special, clip, cover 2 buster, cover 2 cut, all these different rules that just change little subtle things that make it really hard. So if you don't know who you're optioning, and in this case a run-pass option, it's really hard. And then that leads to indecision and either a mistake or interception or just a blown-out play. So Alabama's really hard. I think Clemson's actually got a shot, but I think we'll learn pretty early whether they can move the ball. The advantage for Clemson is if they can get up. Alabama's offense, I don't think, is geared to throw the ball and come back, though they did it against Ole Miss. But it'll be a challenge.
All right, again, that is our good friend Chris B. Brown from smartfootball.com. We didn't just want to leave you with one bit of scheme theme type stuff, did we?
Yeah, we hit on Clemson, we hit on some of the Alabama defensive stuff, but there's a whole other world in this game.
There's a whole other world in this game, and we alluded to it a little bit earlier. Jalen Hurts this year gave Alabama a whole different dimension.
He did.
We're not used to seeing, a guy who can run. Jake Coker didn't run last year. I think Greg McElroy ran a couple
galloped.
Years. Yeah, this is not part of Alabama's offensive game plan. And it's made them all the more dangerous. So we wanted to talk to somebody who could fill in the gaps and let us know, how has this changed things? How will it change things in this game?
Well, I think the best answer is they actually use him, and they use him a lot. In previous years, kind of because of the class of quarterback that Nick Saban recruited and that Alabama had, they just didn't really they didn't really have guys that were runners. They were running a more pro style, kind of bash you over the head type of offensive system. But as Nick Saban has seen what types of offenses have beaten him, or at least given him trouble in the past few years at Alabama, the Tide have evolved into this. And this is really, really good and really, really hard to stop because Jalen Hurts is, I don't want to call him a glorified running back. That's taking away from his ceiling as a passer, which I think is high, although he hasn't met it because he's just a freshman, and I understand that. But he is the leading ball carrier on this team. Like, he is their best running back and their quarterback. And that's what's so scary about kind of this like a three-headed monster that Alabama has. And beyond that, they're going to use Bo Scarborough a lot in the national championship game as well. Lane Kiffin said, and this is even in the wake of his, ouster, whatever you want to call it. Lane Kiffin has said that the game plan was to give Bo Scarborough the ball more than any person on Alabama's roster. So in essence, the thing might even, I don't think it's going to flip to Jalen Hurts not getting so many carries. I just think Alabama in general is going to run the ball a lot more in the national championship game. It's just going to be more from like a two-headed thing than it is just Jalen or a reliance on just Bo Scarborough. It's going to be the both of them kind of taking cracks at Clemson's defense.
Schematically, what are the keys for Alabama's success rushing the ball successfully in this new formation and this new strategy?
It is still largely the zone runs, inside and outside zone, that they've always done. The wrinkles that they employ, they'll do some stuff with some wide receiver sweeps. You'll see Alabama do a little bit of midline option where instead of, typically in a zone read or an option system, you'll see the quarterback read the defensive end. But in a midline option, he literally will read like the nose tackle, like he'll read a defensive tackle instead of defensive end. So it'll look a little bit different on film, and you'll say, oh, well, what was that? Well, he's still making a read. It's just a different player that he's reading. But they'll also use receivers. They send receivers in motion a lot. More than anything, they do it to get the eye discipline of the defense going the wrong way. They want you to pay attention to the wide receiver and almost kind of use him as a decoy to get you out of phase or to move you out of position and negate whatever angle you may have. So the blocking angle is more advantageous for Alabama. And Jalen Hurts as a really, really fast athlete, or even Bo Scarborough, is better suited to blow by you because you as a tackler do not have the angle that you once did. But the bread and butter is still inside and outside zone. It's the same thing that your own college football team probably runs if you're a fan of the sport. It is what pretty much everybody runs, and Alabama, obviously, with their horses, just do it better than anybody else.
How simple do you feel like Alabama's offense has been made for a true freshman quarterback?
I don't know if simple is the word to put it. I do think like they've added things that suit him. Like they've plugged him into a system that more suits him, I think. As an athlete, as a general athlete, even more than just a quarterback. I know they don't throw the ball, some of their concepts and that kind of stuff in the passing game, they're not terribly complex or intricate, but then that goes back to the fact that they run the ball a lot and they run it really, really well. So, it is, like I said, it is largely the same Alabama. They've added some things, Chris Brown, Smart Football, wrote about the toss read that they have. I hadn't got a chance to read that, but like, that's one of those like little wrinkles that they do that I think people like think is this like really, really big thing, but it is essentially an add-in to the general running game concepts that they already have in place. Like Alabama's not going to reinvent the wheel, really. They're just going to kind of tweak what works and continue to do it at a very high level.
With respect to other teams that have been certainly doing this longer, how well do you feel like Alabama has executed? How successful does Alabama look running a more wide open, running quarterback-friendly offense?
Oh, they look good, and they look good because of the personnel more than anything else. I mean, like I've already said it, like the personnel, it's just really good. Like it's still just really good. And if Hurts was a more polished passer at this stage in his development, I think they would look even better. I mean, if they were able to really, I mean, Calvin Ridley is a guy that, and Ardarius Stewart, just really, really talented wideouts. Garrett Dieter as a tight end. Like these guys are, I don't want to say lost in the sauce, but a little bit forgotten about just because Alabama doesn't necessarily, like in that Washington game, like they didn't really hit one of those like Alabama play action bombs that you kind of expect them to hit when they run so well. So those other kind of like wide receivers and stuff like that, they're not even really getting used as much as in years past, or, you know, really showing off what they can do.
All right, that was Richard Johnson. We've got much more to discuss here on our layered College Football National Championship preview.
Are we getting to the sour cream now? Is that how that's working? Little black beans?
I think that's sort of how it's going.
Little queso?
Let's pay some bills. We'll come back at you.
Oh, speaking of.
As you know by now, Clemson and Alabama are cooking up a little something special. Now it's your turn. Try Blue Apron. Here's the way it works. Pick from a variety of savory meals that you want delivered to your home. Blue Apron, they can deliver to 99% of the continental United States and 99.5% of food deserts. They send you exact ingredients, precise instructions, everything you need to cook your delightful feasts in the comfort of your own home. Some of the awesome meals on the menu for January: seared pork chops with farro and cranberry chutney, spaghetti squash and marinara with mushrooms and garlic knots, and spicy shrimp and Korean rice cakes with cabbage and furikake. Check out all of that and much, much more right now at blueapron.com/solid. Get your first 3 meals for free with free shipping by going again to blueapron.com/solid. You will love how it feels and tastes to create an incredible home-cooked meal with Blue Apron, so don't wait. One more time, blueapron.com/solid. Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
Daniel.
Yes.
There is another storyline that is being widely reported. As you know, Lane Kiffin, no longer the offensive coordinator for Alabama. He was all year. He was all last year.
Yeah.
Most important game of the season, Nick Saban decides, let's turn it over to the understudy.
Year before that, if I recall correctly as well, yeah.
Let's turn it over to one Steve Sarkisian.
Indeed. So started the season out looking like he was going to be calling like the number 3 Fox Sports 1 Big 12 game of the week. Finishes the season controlling an offense for his first national championship since his run at USC.
I mean, it's a bit of a meteoric rise.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It'd be more meteoric if he didn't already have some prominent head coaching and play calling experience, but nonetheless, it is notable in the biggest game of the college football season. What we wanted to do is figure just how is this going to factor in? We needed to find somebody. Is there anybody out there that you can think of? I don't know. Somebody who knows what both these guys can do as play callers.
Sure.
If we can find that human being, maybe we could add another layer here.
I feel like if we could find somebody, perhaps, who has followed USC for decades and might know some tendencies and personality quirks of Steve Sarkisian, maybe somebody like Ryan Abraham of USCFootball.com to weigh in.
Ryan Abraham, he's seen both play callers up close and in person. How are these guys alike? How are they different? Have a listen.
Now, there are certainly some similarities between Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian, both coming from that Pete Carroll tree at USC as far as being offensive coordinators and play callers. First with Steve Sarkisian, I think he's actually probably a better play caller than Lane. I think a little bit less ego gets involved, and I can talk about that in a minute with Lane Kiffin. But I don't think he's probably like as an original thinker as Lane. Lane's a little bit more creative. Maybe thinking more outside of the box. I think what you saw, he ran more of a spread system up in Seattle, and I really liked the way he utilized the tight ends and focused on the running game too. It wasn't just a pass-happy offense, and they kind of got away from that when he came to USC. But what you saw in Seattle, I thought there were some real positive signs there. And then coming back down to USC, the offense wasn't really what a lot of USC fans thought it was going to be. Now, he only lasted for 18 games, and I think still a lot of that was under development. And you saw Cody Kessler be a really efficient passer under Steve Sarkisian, but it really wasn't quite the explosive offense that a lot of people would have liked to see. As far as Lane Kiffin goes, I do think his ego kind of gets in the way sometimes as a play caller. He does seem to be a guy that's a lot more about the X's and O's of the play than the Jimmies and Joes. You have a lot of great players, and a lot of times you're just trying to fool somebody or show somebody how smart you are. And I think you could see that in a lot of the games he called, especially this last game in the semifinal, when you have a running back that's just bowling people over, and you decide to go away from that. And it just, you've seen that before, or even like using the utilization of the tight end. He waited till all season last year until the national championship game. There's so many weapons there at Alabama, and I think it gets to the point where if there's something that's obviously working, he doesn't want to use it because it doesn't really give him a whole lot of credit. If you see Bo Scarborough just running people over, everyone kind of knows that already, so he'd rather do something else to show you how smart he is.
So that's good info. The other thing we asked Ryan is how he thinks Sark is going to handle this sudden onslaught of pressure, because he's been on the sidelines since his dismissal from USC. This is a big spot to just plug and play. How will he deal with that kind of pressure?
Yeah, and I'm more curious long-term what his situation at Alabama is. I think, in a short amount of time, yes, he's being thrust into a big position like the national championship game, but it's basically a week. It is a week, and he will either figure out how to make it his own and sort of call this game successfully, or he won't. I'm curious about the week in, week out, the recruiting, the meeting, that whole thing, what Steve Sarkisian's long-term tenure, a year, 2 years, 3 years, looks like at Alabama. That's the fascinating thing.
Here's what Ryan Abraham had to say.
Now, as far as Sark taking over for Lane, certainly there's going to be a lot of pressure there, but there's not a lot of time to think about it, 5 or 6 days. We've seen, Sark fold under pressure at USC his last game when he played his former team, Washington. But he's had a lot of time off, and I think, hopefully his mind is right and he'll be able to jump back into the game. But just from being on the sidelines all this time, you're thrust into the most important game probably of your career. I do think there's going to be a lot of pressure there, but he's not going to be able to change all that much. I do expect it to see, I think he's going to recognize probably what works best and where the best assets are. I think you're going to see Jalen Hurts, run the ball just like you normally would. But Bo Scarborough being able to pound the ball a little bit, maybe it won't be as easy against that Clemson front versus Washington, but I think they're going to be committed to the run. And I think you're going to utilize the tight end position a little bit more, which can be kind of a security blanket for any quarterback, especially a freshman one. So I kind of think he's going to do okay in that role. It's Nick Saban's show, and Steve Sarkisian is basically just taking over as the chauffeur. He's not going to be asked to do a lot. Call the plays, get the guys out there. You have superior athletes most of the time. Put them in a position to win, and I think he'll be able to do that.
All right, there you go. Everything you ever wanted to know about Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, what have you, from a guy who would know Ryan Abraham from USC football.
The smartest of us all, living in Southern California in the sunshine.
You know it, man. All right, you've heard the expression, the game within the game.
Yeah.
I think it's overused. Mm-hmm. There are like 8 different games within this game, and we're doing our best here with this preview to try and cover them all. The coaches. Mm-hmm. How could we omit the coaches? Let's talk about coaches now.
Yeah. First up is Andy Staples, who has written about the process, and the key thing to remember with Nick Saban and the process in Alabama is it's not a results-oriented thing. It is a literal journey to the results. That's where the satisfaction comes from. So really interested to hear from Andy about where he feels like this year's Alabama team ranks or just sort of settles among the recent great Alabama teams, and if he feels like Nick Saban is in a place where he is pleased, he is satisfied.
His happy place.
Absolutely.
I think he's pretty pleased because this is sort of his evolution plan coming to fruition. He started this thing probably even before Johnny Football beat them in 2012. He was aware that the offense was changing, that they were going to have to deal with more and more dual-threat quarterbacks, that the things that they did on defense weren't going to work as well anymore as the game evolved. So he started recruiting, like the class of 2013, Jonathan Allen, Tim Williams. Those guys are not guys that they necessarily would have recruited for the same positions in 2008. Because before, the defense was designed to stop LSU. They had to deal with LSU. That was the biggest threat to them. And LSU played basically like they did. They were, could play in a phone booth, downhill running. You needed to be huge up the middle. You needed Terrence Cody, 340 pounds, up the middle. You needed Rolando McClain, 265 pounds behind him. Now you've got Deron Payne at about 315, 320. And then behind him, you've got Reuben Foster at like 228. And Jonathan Allen at 290, where Jesse Williams played at about 320. So it has definitely shrunken the defense. And then offensively, the change is more obvious because they went after the same kind of quarterback that they were having trouble with. And they finally landed one of Jalen Hurts, and lo and behold, he wins the starting job his freshman year. So I think this is the result of all the changes that he started making around 2012. It's hard to tell if it was before or after that season that they began in earnest, but the fact that a lot of these guys that are in the 2013 class have been such big contributors to the changes suggests that he already had them in mind even before that season began.
A lot of times after either losses or close wins, shootout-type games, whether it's Texas A&M, whether it's Ole Miss last year against Clemson, Nick Saban will talk about being relieved to sort of escape with a win or, being kept up nights. Do you think this is all sort of part of his evolution? Has he always wanted to be able to field different types of defenses? Do you think he has a stubbornness streak to what kind of defenses he plays? Or is it just sort of, this is what's necessary, this is what he's going to do?
He's one of the least philosophically stubborn coaches in football. He is more inquisitive, more open to adaptation than most of his peers, and that's why he beats his peers so often. Because the coaches who say, this is my system, I'm the genius who came up with this, you will do what my genius mind came up with, and that's all we're going to do, they're the ones who get passed by. Well, Nick Saban is still winning national titles in basically different eras of college football because, the clock rule changed in 2008. He's won 4 national titles since then, but I would argue that the first 3, the world hadn't changed all that much. The last one was a very different football environment than the first 3. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing is he's willing to change. Like Ohio State beats them, he brings in Tom Herman and says, show us how you beat us. And then he adapts to it. When he brings in a new offensive coordinator like Kiffin, he says, these are some of the things I want done. I want you to up the tempo. I want jet sweeps. I want this. I want this. I want this. And, Lane Kiffin had never been an up-tempo offensive coordinator before he got to Alabama. That was Nick Saban's doing.
Is there any reason to believe now that Deshaun Watson, the Clemson offensive coaching staffs, and now Clemson's offense with an added weapon they didn't have last year in Mike Williams, is there any reason to believe playing Alabama's defense already on this stage last year gives them an advantage that Nick Saban, having played Clemson's offense, does Clemson have any sort of advantage over Nick Saban at this point?
It's not an advantage they have over Nick Saban. It's a difference between them and most of the teams Alabama plays. Most of the teams Alabama plays lose to fear before they lose to Alabama's actual defense. And Clemson has no reason to fear Alabama's defense because they scored 40 on them last year. For the same reason that Ole Miss this year did not fear Alabama's defense because they'd beaten Alabama 2 years in a row. So you got to have some success against them before they stop beating you when they get off the bus, for lack of a better term. Part of the problem is teams that haven't had success against them or have never seen them before, you see them show up for warm-ups and you're like, oh my Lord, every one of these people is going to be in the NFL. They're so much better than us. How are we going to do this? But Clemson has basically the same level of athlete, and they had such success last year. I don't think they're going to come in afraid of Alabama at all. And that's one of the biggest advantages Alabama has in most games. It will not have it in this game.
Is there any reason to believe that Nick Saban now, especially if he wins this year, he is sort of in uncharted territory, high-level college, pro football, in terms of how often he's won? Is there any sense that there is a point in which Nick Saban will just be satisfied with his accomplishments?
I think he's got to pass Bear Bryant. And if he wins this one, he'll tie him. So we would still need one more, at least. And, you know, it's sort of like the whole Tiger Woods situation. You assume this can go on forever, and then all of a sudden it just drops off. I don't see a drop-off coming up for Nick Saban. He's 65, but he looks like he's 40. This might be his best recruiting class, the class of 2017, that he's had at Alabama, which is saying something. So they seem to be set up to compete for national titles for at least 3-4 more years. So I think he's got a good chance of passing Bear Bryant. But it's hard to win a national title, and probably nobody knows it more than he does because he's won so many of them. I mean, it is not easy to get there. It takes some good fortune. It takes some breaks. And so if he wins this one, I would bet he's going to go for at least one more.
So other guys who have had not this level of success, but ongoing year over year success recently. So Pete Carroll and Urban Meyer are the two big ones that come to mind in terms of winning national championships, plural. They leave their jobs for, you know, Urban Meyer for health and burnout reasons. Pete Carroll leaves. I mean, there's the looming sanctions and also the opportunity to succeed again in the NFL, and also which he did. And the limitations of you can only practice so much. You can, you know, there were certain levels that Pete Carroll didn't want to, or certain things that he didn't want to deal with anymore at USC. If not for just being satisfied, what is either a positive or negative thing that you could see Nick Saban just saying, all right, my time in Tuscaloosa is over?
The only thing I think that would bother him enough to chase him out are the expectation that they are supposed to win every game and every national title. Because realistically, that's not possible, even though they've come awfully close. I think that's probably the biggest knock on that job right now, but he's got a better job than most of his peers because he can go to the president and say, this is what I want, and he'll get it. And not many other coaches get that. So he's in a good spot. I don't think, I mean, he would have gone back to the NFL already, I think, if he was going back. I think he's going to be a college coach. He's going to be a college coach at Alabama. I think the next move is to TV, but the question is how many more titles is he going to win before he goes to TV?
One of the things that's obviously a big storyline going in is Steve Sarkisian taking over the offense. Is there anything that's known about the relationship between Steve Sarkisian, who advances from being an analyst, and Nick Saban? Obviously, the Lane Kiffin relationship seemed, at least from the outside, pretty contentious. Is there anything that's known sort of with Sark being thrust into this position?
Not really. Not much has emerged in terms of behind-the-scenes stuff, but, you know, Sark had his troubles at USC with alcohol, but common sense tells you that he probably hasn't had many issues at Alabama, because if he did, he would have been fired from his $35,000 a year analyst job immediately. I mean, this was a second chance, zero tolerance kind of deal for him when he got brought in. So my guess is he's been able to do what he's, because think about this. If there were any problems, Nick Saban would know about them. And a guy who hates distractions more than anything else, if there had been problems, those would have been distractions, and a $35,000 a year analyst is not worth distractions. So that would have been that. So I don't know about in terms of interpersonal relationship. I mean, the question is how much interpersonal contact have they had before this week? Because obviously Sark was being groomed for this, but were they talking every day? Were they talking a couple times a week? Were they talking once a week? I mean, it's a pretty big organization that Nick Saban runs. How much realistically could he have dealings with one of the analysts?
What is it on that same note that what is it about Nick Saban's, I guess, force of personality or regimen or ability to run a program? And mentioning Pete Carroll earlier, one of the things that sort of bedeviled him was attrition, coaches, players, whatever. It's just hard to keep things up year over year. Nick Saban loses coaches. He loses position coaches, coordinators, whatever. And yet, from the outside, the drop-off is minimal, if any. What is it about Nick Saban specifically that makes him so good at just being consistent in hiring the right people, in figuring out the right ways to sort of mix people? What is it about the sort of the business mind of Nick Saban that so consistently works?
He's willing to be more consistent, and he's more disciplined than the rest of us. There are people as disciplined as him, but there aren't many. All right, Dan, you and I, when we were thinking about what we were going to eat for lunch, we imagined the entire realm of possibilities.
Spectrum, yeah.
Tacos, pizza, burgers, sushi, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Saban eats the same salads for lunch every day because that's one less choice he has to make. He likes it, tastes good, gives him what he needs. That's all he needs. And you would call that boring. I wouldn't do that. But that makes me less consistent than he is. That makes me less disciplined than he is. He is disciplined like that in every phase of his professional life, which creates a very disciplined program, and he hires people that are going to adhere to that discipline, and if they aren't, they're not going to be around very long.
Do you think winning football makes him happy, or do you think working to win at football makes him happy?
That's a process question right there, and it's a good one. The process tells you winning at football is not the thing that will make you happy. Doing the things that make you win at football are the things that should satisfy you. And then you reach the ultimate goal because you took every step along the way. I always tell people this. Do you remember the exercise in kindergarten or first grade where the teacher says, tell me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And you say, well, you get some bread, and you get some peanut butter, and you get some jelly, and you put the peanut butter on the bread, and then the teacher goes, oh, no. You have to unscrew the jar of peanut butter first, and then you have to dip the knife in the peanut butter, and then you have to put the peanut butter on the bread. Nick Saban would get that right. He wouldn't skip a step. The rest of us would skip a step.
All right, so that's Andy Staples. You know him from SI.com, longtime friend of the show. He's like one of the first people we ever interviewed.
Yeah, we were coworkers, colleagues with Andy Staples way back when at SI.com when I was doing video and you were writing. Shout out to Jimmy Traina. Shout out to Maggie Gray. Shout out to everybody.
Such a great bit there by him where both of you guys really, when you talk about, is Nick Saban happy? Is he happy with this? And it comes up from time to time. It's a real question.
Yeah.
You just don't know what makes him tick. I don't think he has the same motivating factors as 99% of the other people out there. Andy acknowledged as much. He's just a different kind of cat.
He is a different cat, and I would like to quote the great and immortal Miley Cyrus.
Yeah.
It's not the results. It's the climb.
It's all about the climb.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, the other coaching element in this game is Dabo Swinney.
Yeah. An incredible story.
An incredible story. Totally different kind of cat from Nick Saban. Much more excitable, just different in so many different ways. We could do 8 different podcasts talking about it. We had the good fortune of stumbling across our good friend Chip Patterson from CBS Sports. Mr. ACC. We've had him on this program countless times to talk about all things ACC football.
Yep.
Who better to talk about Dabo Swinney than Chip Patterson? So we asked him a couple of things about Dabo. First and foremost, what did you learn from a year ago in that heartbreaking 5-point loss?
I think that with each of the big non-conference wins, which include 2 against Oklahoma, which go all the way back to that tight LSU game, the Ohio State in the Orange Bowl a few years back. I think that was like a 40-35 game, another very tight game. I think that he understands that the building has to take these there's got to be some confidence to it. Like in 2011, here we go. 2011, Clemson beat Virginia Tech. It was their first ACC championship in 30 years. And Dabo Swinney told us, he was like, listen, man, we're not just going to rock it up. We are building something to last. And that was in 2011. Then they got stomped by Dana Holgorsen in West Virginia. They hung 70 on him. And there was something in that experience where every single time that Clemson has come back and had another big-time game against a power conference opponent, there's been a little bit of extra confidence and a little bit of extra experience. No longer going up against Alabama are they a team that is continuing to build up that resume of experience. Now he's got it down to a format. He knows what it takes to coach 15 games, how to work these guys up, how to rev it down. And I might even say that contributes to how comfortable these Clemson players were in their own skin, while everybody else earlier this season was freaking out that they weren't as good as, big old air quotes here for the podcast, but they weren't as good as last year's team.
So when you look at this matchup, again, from a coaching perspective, it seems to be widely assumed that Nick Saban is the one with some kind of advantage.
He is the one.
Where does Dabo have an advantage?
Dabo's advantage probably lies in the unknown, in the fact that the book on him is still being written. And it's not much of an advantage. You know, I think Clemson's advantage in this game is the fact that they have a phenomenal defensive line and a game plan from the LSU game that they can apply. And I think Dabo Swinney and his staff are smart enough to look for advantages and exploit them, but sheer coaching advantages, Dabo Swinney he has gone up against Alabama on the recruiting trail and been able to, give Clemson a fight here. He has been able to go out and make Clemson a recognized brand. He has been able to be the salesman that Clemson needed him to be. But he doesn't have a coaching advantage against Nick Saban.
But there is some value, as you said, to being the crazy guy in the fight.
No doubt.
To being the Gary Sheffield out there, right? To not have a book on you is something that you can use.
I think that, you know what he learned from last year? He's going to be looking for that onside kick. They're not going to leave that thing wide open again. Because that's reviewing the tape, Alabama had it 2 times before they finally hit it on the third. I guarantee you Clemson will not have that spot of the field open again on kickoffs.
All right, again, his name, Chip Patterson,
Yep.
CBSSports.com. The layers just keep coming to flapjacks here, stacking them on top of each other. We are nearing the final stretch where we add up all the data here.
Yeah.
We crack out the slide rule and make our selections.
I feel like we've almost jam-packed too much information and too much relevant football nuggetry.
Okay. Nuggetry, yeah.
Nuggetry. I
Gotcha.
think it's time to take a half step back and sort of really honor what this show is all about in the first place. And that is
total mindlessness,
fried food, and Florida recommendations.
So the Tampa intangible factor.
The Tampa intangibles.
Very important. People here on Audio Avenue. I should know this.
Yeah.
They're not talking about the Tampa intangibles.
No, they're not. Absolutely not. They're talking too much football. So we have Ryan Anney of SB Nation to sort of pull back the camera a little bit and talk about the game as a TV show, just what he wants to see from a pure entertainment spectacle, and then Tampa's first son. What to do if you're coming into town, what to do for this game.
So I think I'm looking forward to the game going long, because it always goes long.
Right.
And people are going to be unhappy about it because they're going to be like, oh, why do we always do this on a Monday? I got to take the kids to school. Ah, Jesus. Stupid No. Long games are usually good games, but there's always some people, and I'm not necessarily criticizing them for that, but they're just like, oh, you got to be kidding. You got to be. What? No, run the ball. Just take a knee. I don't care that it's tied.
On the Alabama side, what would make you laugh the most if you were to see blank happen from Alabama, either with the ball, defensively, outcome of this game, Sark related?
I think the funniest thing that could happen on Alabama's side of the ball is if they unveiled this just deadly passing attack. If you're like, wow, Jalen Hurts threw for 380 yards, completed 80% of his passes. Clearly Lane Kiffin had no idea what he was doing with this kid.
On Clemson's side, anything specifically from Dabo, from Deshaun Watson, from Ben Boulware? Ben Boulware, we're on the record right now.
Right.
4 fingers deep is an actual phrasing.
So we talked about this on Shutdown Fullcast.
Yeah.
4 fingers is not a measure of depth. It's a measure of width. You know, all your fingers are mostly the same length. So what you're going to want to watch for entertainment value from Clemson is Dabo is obviously prone to weird post-game or halftime interviews when he's agitated in some way. And I think winning the national championship would take Dabo to an emotional place that I don't think any of us can contemplate. I think he would cry, but I think more importantly, he will just start speaking in gibberish. And then like a week later, we'll realize that if you play it backwards, it actually made perfect sense in English, but only if you play it backwards.
What should people know about Tampa, Florida? What should they do in Tampa? And what defines the city of Tampa?
Here are the important facts you need to know.
Yes.
A, Tampa has a bunch of strip clubs.
Yeah.
B, these strip clubs are not like kept off in some, this is the seedy part of. No, they're on
an industrial.
They're on a main thoroughfare. When Tampa got its first Whole Foods, it's walking distance to these strip clubs. Third, the man who started the most prominent strip clubs is a man named Joe Redner. I believe. He has run for mayor, city council. He's run for a bunch of things in Tampa. Has never won. But I believe his son is co-owner of a microbrewery in Tampa called Cigar City, which makes really excellent beer.
Okay.
So you can go there and say you drink strip club air beer.
Strip club air.
H-E-I-R, not A-I-R. That's an important anymore. But the airport's great.
Is it a good airport?
The airport's fantastic.
Have they recently redone it or
Wi-Fi?
something?
No, they have done improvements to it over the last 5 years or so, but it's always been a really solid airport. And, of course, Tampa is home to Outback Steakhouse, the Australian-themed restaurant founded by people who had never been to Australia.
After seeing Crocodile Dundee, apparently.
I think that's what it was. I think they thought they could capitalize on the Aussie Aussiephilia going on at the time. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And by the way, I don't know if this is something you want made public.
This is 100% public.
Let me use this stage as we conclude and move on with the show to say anybody from the Outback Bowl or anybody who just feels like tweeting at the Outback Bowl, we are desperate to make Ryan Bloomy the Bloomin' Onion for the 2017 Outback Bowl and whatever responsibilities that may entail.
I think the hashtag, we're still talking about it. The one I like best so far is Fryin' Nanny.
Fryin' Nanny.
So that one's good.
That's kind of a winner to me.
Have you ever eaten a bloomin' onion?
I have. You know what I used to? This is the most disgusting thing. I guarantee you this is the most disgusting thing you'll hear about food today.
Sure.
In college, this was in Eugene, Oregon, maybe Springfield,
Oregon.
Oregon.
This feels like a first-year move, first or second year.
You would think.
Yeah.
But it was all throughout.
Okay.
I don't remember the terminology that we called it, but in Springfield, Oregon, which is sort of like Eugene, but for shady people.
Yep.
Next door, we would go to Outback Steakhouse and Jack in the Box, and I would get 6 disgusting grease envelopes that they call tacos at Jack in the Box and split a bloomin' onion and just annihilate my insides.
Wow.
This is totally unrelated, though. I was a larger person in college.
Wow.
Yeah. It's real bad. I do like the bloomin' onion, though. I haven't had it in a long time.
Wow.
When was the last time you had a bloomin' onion?
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not something, once you hit a certain age, you're like, man, I can't.
Well, you also can't do anything after. What are you going to have a bloomin' onion, play a couple sets of tennis? No. You're done.
Challenge accepted. If it will, you know what? If I have to eat a bloomin' onion and play 2 pro sets.
Right.
Play 2 pro sets, and that'll get me bloomy, I'll do it.
Absolutely, you will.
All right, Ryan Nanny, first son.
Yeah.
Of the Tampa St. Pete metro area.
This is true. He supposedly has a picture or a name on a debate trophy at his high school. So if you can piece together where he went to high school, go check it out.
All right. That does it for the layers.
It does.
So many layers here. Do you have enough information now at hand to make a selection?
No, because I need to hear from you.
You need to hear from me. You're going to let me influence your pick?
Absolutely I am, because you have figured out, you've tapped into a winning formula this year of deep dive, research, figure out how everything sort of dances with your gut, and then you just go the other way.
Yeah.
And that's been a pretty successful formula for you this year.
Through bowl season, I didn't quite adhere to that the same way I did during the regular season.
Bowl season is a different animal. But this is a game with huge stakes, not unlike regular season games that week to week there are huge stakes. And this is a game that, much in the way you've done with the bigger games during the regular season, You've researched, you've thought about, you've weighed different factors in your head that are important to you. I've done the same. And yes, am I the surest thing in college football picking? Of course I am.
100% of the time, right or wrong. Yeah.
Right or wrong, 100% of the time. That's mathematics, people. But no, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for your thoughts.
All right.
So,
well, I have a couple things that I'm chewing on.
Yeah.
The first is I'm not sure I know what this offensive game plan looks like for Steve Sarkisian now.
Yeah.
With Alabama. You heard Ryan allude to it a little bit in his bit, but he thinks Sark is more devoted to what works and less devoted to his own ego. Doesn't care so much about looking like the smartest guy in the room.
Right.
Just wants to trot plays out there that he knows are going to work. I think in the case of Alabama, we know what would work. We know what works best for them anyway. What has throughout the course of the season, that is the running game.
Yep.
They want to run the football. I fear a little bit, because it's his first game as offensive coordinator, that it might be super conservative. That if there's a spot where he needs to stretch the field vertically, maybe he will be a little bit apprehensive about doing that. I don't know.
Fair.
Just something I've been chewing on all week. The other thing that
who does that favor? Early conservatism in this game.
Early conservatism, probably favors Clemson.
Yeah.
Because Clemson, I don't think, is going to have any conservatism at all.
Right.
That's just not their style.
Right.
The other thing that's bouncing around for me is Deshaun Watson. And you could cut this thing 100 different ways if you want to, but what we saw towards the end of last season, what we've seen a little bit, though not to the same extent, but a little bit again this season, is that in the biggest spots, Deshaun Watson gets the ball more. Sometimes he throws more often he runs more.
Yep.
But pretty much 100% of the time, they're leaning on him heavily to try and win this game. Last year, look at what he did in the championship game. He ran it at least 20 times in each of his final 4 games, but in the championship in particular, 478 total yards, 4 touchdowns, 405 passing. That's the most in national championship history.
Yep.
So I think what I'm getting at here is how far can he take them? As one singular man against this incredible defense, how far can one guy take Clemson? I have a hard time believing he can take them all the way to the promised land.
Alone.
He needs help.
Yeah.
And he's got the big receivers, and I think maybe they can channel some, modest running game here and there in spots, in situations. But as a whole, I don't think there's enough balance. So for as much as I want to see Clemson win, and for as much as I'd like to see something different, I'm going to go Alabama to win this game. I'm going to say something in the ballpark of 27-23, 27-24.
So very similar but lower scoring.
Similar but lower scoring, as Bill Connolly mentioned earlier. I think Alabama wins another national championship. But I would not be surprised if Clemson pulled the upset.
Oh, you hedger.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay.
I think Clemson covers, but Alabama wins.
Okay. My question to you as a follow-up is, what is it about Jalen Hurts specifically? And it may be a matter of the fact that the combination of Alabama's defense, I believe, leading the nation in touchdowns, touchdown scoring defenses, going against a Clemson offense that has been a little bit too careless this year, has turned the ball over more than we expected. That's not a great hat-to-hat combination. What is it about, if there isn't Alabama defensive touchdowns, about Jalen Hurts that you feel like against this Clemson defense, coming off of a shutout, coming off of some very impressive defensive performances, that makes you feel like he can lead to 27 points against a very good defense?
I feel like he's got...
After struggling with Washington, too, I should mention, through the air.
After struggling, and he did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another factor that we could certainly consider. I have more confidence in the pieces that he has alongside him in the rushing game. I think than I do the pieces alongside Deshaun Watson. So, as we've seen, the formula at Alabama is you don't always need to have a premier quarterback to win.
Right.
You need to have good pieces around that quarterback, but you don't need to have a guy who does a whole lot. You just need to find somebody who doesn't turn the ball over. Hurts gives them an extra dimension with his legs. I think that combined with the fact that he's got some really good pieces in the running game too, reliable pieces. Damian Harris, Bo Scarborough, we saw what he did. I feel really good about some combination of those guys against anybody, let alone Clemson.
If Clemson is forcing 3rd and 7s consistently, how much more worried are you about your Alabama pick?
Consistently?
Yeah, if they're consistently okay, it's 3rd and 7, if they're forcing passing downs over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And one of the differences, Jake Coker threw the ball downfield really well last year in big games. That Michigan State game, he had multiple huge bombs, notably to Calvin Ridley, but our Darius Stewart is still there. If Clemson, I'm not going to say if they make them one-dimensional, but if Clemson is able to force some single-dimensional activity from Alabama, does it become a toss-up sort of situation to you?
Let's put it this way. Alabama averaged 5.7 yards per carry this year.
Yes.
All right. If they are continually finding themselves in 3rd and long situations, that's bad.
Yeah.
That's not a good situation.
They've put up 5 yards per carry, not against Dexter Lawrence and Christian Wilkins.
That is correct.
Yes.
However, for the entirety of their season, being that consistent in the rushing game has absolutely made them what they are.
Yeah.
So if, in fact, Clemson could find a way to put a cap on that, maybe make it 4 yards a carry, I don't know. Get some tackles for loss. If they're doing that reliably, consistently, that changes this game. All of a sudden, then I think that tips things in favor, perhaps, of Deshaun Watson. What can he do with the pieces around him? How much can he run for? If we see that situation develop time and time again, then yeah, that's a situation I think that Alabama's afraid of.
I'm going to fearlessly pick Clemson. I'm going to tell you why. I'm not going to hedge. Of course, none of us would be surprised if Alabama wins this game. But I am saying Clemson wins this game, period, without I wouldn't be surprised if. Clemson, and I think it's a pretty equal game. Clemson has the sort of advantage of they're coming off of a year in which they know they cannot just hang with Alabama. They can beat Alabama. They're not losing this game, like Andy Staples said, before they even play, which is the case with a lot of Alabama opponents. You have a true freshman quarterback. We've seen first-year quarterbacks succeed in the national championship game. Nick Marshall had a pretty nice game against Florida State. Cam Newton won. Jameis Winston. These were redshirt freshmen. Jalen Hurts is a true freshman, although he's been there since January and played Deshaun Watson as a scout teamer this past January, a year ago. But I think because things seem to me to be so equal, I think Alabama's big advantage is I think they have a much better secondary than Clemson's secondary. I think without Mackenzie Alexander, they don't have that true lockdown guy. But I also don't think Jalen Hurts is a quarterback that can expose really good secondaries. It's not elite, whatever that word has come to mean in 2017. But if you are going to give me a relatively neutral field, I expect it to be about 50-50. Because, we're not far from Clemson. We're not far from Alabama. It's not going to be a decided crowd. You're going to give me... And Alabama does have a running back and a running game advantage. And that's big. But I think Deshaun Watson is a true star and is a true game changer in a way that Alabama, I don't think that they have. They have it on defense. I don't think offensively they have somebody who can take over a game.
So the counter question, counterpoint, what have you. Let's say, hypothetically, that the true teeth of this Alabama defense, its linebacking core, is able to confuse Deshaun Watson. We've seen it countless times this year. Deshaun Watson doesn't see a linebacker, doesn't see somebody lurking and short zone coverage, something like that, and throws an interception. Let's say through a half of this game, Deshaun Watson's having a hard time dissecting that portion of the Alabama defense. The passing game isn't coming as naturally.
Sure, not in a rhythm. 328
yards per game, 7th nationally in terms of passing offense. Let's say it's nowhere near that.
Reasonable to guess, yeah.
Can Clemson still win the game?
Yes, because I don't think he's going to go into a shell. We're talking about somebody who is, I think we're pretty sure, is a first-round NFL quarterback, and not in a Jared Goff way. In a, we've seen him beat really good teams really recently kind of way. I think we're positive of his talent. We've seen him have, I think it's pretty clearly the best and biggest game of his career on the best and biggest stage. So I don't think if he throws a pick early, he is going to become tentative. He throws the ball downfield. Even the interception. It took an out-of-this-world Malik Hooker play to pick him off in the end zone. That's what it takes at times when he is operating. I think they're going to be creative. We talked to Chris Brown about the sort of wrinkles that they've added to the run game, the toss read. So I think Clemson is constantly evolving. I think it's going to be a great cat and mouse game. I love the Alabama defense, but on a stage like this, what did Alabama need last year? They needed a Herculean effort from O.J. Howard after Clemson was beat up. That's a reality. Clemson's defense doesn't rush the passer maybe as well as they did last year, but to me, it's hard for me to to pick, like, okay, Alabama is going to get a crazy game from Calvin Ridley or Darius Stewart, Bo Scarborough. Maybe, but I'm more sure of Deshaun Watson than any one of those players breaking out. So I'm going with Clemson. I have it 28-27 in my head.
28-27.
Yeah, nail biter. And you ready? If we're going to get very specific, Alabama wide right in the closing seconds. How about that?
Wide right closing seconds.
So what would be...
That wouldn't be unforeseen?
Would not be unforeseen. What would be the most surprising outcome? Clemson big, 10-7?
Clemson big would be surprising.
Yeah.
That would be surprising.
Nobody comfortably beats Alabama.
No. I mean, it's always by the hair on your chin, right? It's not...
I mean, you could argue Ohio State sort of did a couple years ago with Zeke.
Yeah.
That was relatively comfortable.
That would be a surprise, I think. In the same way, probably a much bigger way, than what we saw in the semifinal with Clemson shutting out Ohio State, because that was a bit unexpected too.
I think, to me, a bigger surprise would be Clemson winning this game with Deshaun Watson not having a great game.
It's like Wayne Gallman rips off 300 yards.
It's Wayne Gallman going for 208 and the defense scoring 2 touchdowns, flipping the field, something like that. Like Clemson winning 16-13 with a pedestrian offensive effort would be kind of a shocker to me.
All right, so you're all in on Clemson, 28-27.
Fearlessly, Ty.
Fearlessly, okay.
Yes.
I'm going to go Alabama. I'm going to be the boring old man.
That's okay.
27-24 is my final answer.
Yeah, it's very exciting when people pick Alabama and Alabama wins. That's always the best.
We do have, thank you. We do have a consensus, though.
Which
we both like Clemson plus
yeah, we both like the points. We're going to gobble those points up.
All right. Well, we do thank everybody who chimed in, from Bill Connolly to Bud Elliott, Chris Brown, Richard Johnson, still seated at the table here.
Absolutely. Diligently working.
We've also had Ryan Abraham on this show, Andy Staples, Chip Patterson, and, of course, our good friend, the first son now of Tampa, Ryan Neal.
Oh, yes.
All right. There you go. Enjoy the game. We'll be here all weekend. We'll be doing interviews. You'll hear those interviews at some point in the future. We'll be doing Facebook Live, YouTube
Facebook.com/solidverbal, YouTube.com/thesolidverbal.
All sorts of cool stuff. So if you're a fan, if you like the show, do stay tuned to our Twitter, to our Facebook, to our Snapchat, to our Instagram. Everywhere you can find the Verbal.
If you really search, you can find our Pornhub channel.
That's right.
If you really search. And it's G-rated. It is very clean. But, you know, we have to hit every audience.
On that note, for the fine gentleman seated directly across from me, Mr. Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thanks again for joining us. Enjoy the football game. We'll talk to you all on Tuesday. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.